It's Chelsea.
It's Nina.
And you're in the Critic's Kingdom.
Hello, hello, lovely people, and welcome to another episode of the Critic's Kingdom.
Hello, hello.
How are you doing this week?
And today we're going to be looking into Stepsister from Planet Weird, which was one that I think Nina and I were both fans of when we were kids. It came out in 2000.
Yeah, I really liked this one as a kid. It was one of those ones that I would watch whenever it was on.
Yeah, I'd agree. I remember really enjoying it as a kid. And revisiting it was actually interesting. So Nina, if you actually want to give us a recap of what went on.
Yeah, sure. So the main character, or I guess one of the main characters of this particular film is Megan Larson. And the movie begins, and it pretty much shows her dreaming of the perfect life. She loves to windsurf, and she gets asked out by the boy that she thinks is cute, and her parents are together again, which is so the main character is having that divorced child syndrome situation where she just wishes that they'd reunite. But we quickly see that that was all a dream, and her life's really not like that. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Her mom is a bit of a mess post-divorce. Not so bad that, social services needs to be called, but noticeable to the children. She's not really cool at school, and the guy that she's into, barely even notices her. The only reason that his name is Cutter, and the only reason that he has noticed her as of late is because he has gotten into windsurfing too, and her mom, owns a windsurfing shop on the beach. So we sort of just see that her life's a little sad, at least in her opinion. 14-year-old girls, life's always a little sad. And her mom, while windsurfing, ends up meeting this new guy who's sort of a very sweet man-child named Cosmo, who says he's from the Yukon. And what happened was he saw her windsurfing on the beach. He was on the beach, saw her windsurfing, and got really scared for her because he fears the wind. So he jumped into the sea to try to save her, and she just found that so sweet and so cute, and they got to talking, and she's really into him. So we see that she's going on a bunch of dates, and it's essentially getting pretty serious to the point where she invites him over to meet Megan and her little brother Trevor, who's the same little kid from Mom's Got a Date with a Vampire, which is pleasant to see him again. And apparently he also has a daughter named Ariel, who's Megan's age. And when he shows up, Trevor, her little brother, is like, "Oh, you're an alien. I think you're a good one, but you're definitely an alien." And Ariel is still out by the car, so Megan is sent to go get her. And when she goes to find her, Ariel's actually underneath the car because I guess the wind started blowing and she fears the wind. So then we get a perspective switch, and we sort of go all the way back to the beginning of all of this from Ariel's perspective, and we essentially get, lo and behold, Trevor is right, her alien backstory. Her and her father are from the planet Zircalon, where everyone there is, essentially a bubble floating in the gaseous atmosphere. And she, her father was part of, a rebel resistance, essentially, to the Emperor, who is, the father of her now long-lost love, Fanul. And, things got kind of heated, and her father, managed to just, escape in the nick of time, but her mother got, zapped. And they escaped to planet Earth, and now she, hates it here. She hates having to be in this body. She doesn't find it attractive, or she hates that everything is so solid on this planet. And she's sort of keeping her wits about her by writing in this diary. And it's kind of cool because they do it where she thinks things or says things, and it shows up in this alien script that's made of light, and then she can put put it into this little orb thing. It's kind of cool. It's a cool little special effect. But she really wants to contact Fanul. Her father's like, no, that you can't contact him because we can't risk the Emperor finding out where we are. If he does, he'll freeze me forever and turn me into, a cube, a frozen cube. So that's the state she's in. So to sort of, keep herself afloat, she tries to see this psychic named Serena Sue. The psychic is clearly a fraud in the worst of ways. And she's like trying to get by with this thing, but her dad has apparently started dating this new woman. And at first she's kind of like, yo, what about mom though? Like, that's a little toe up. Mom, like, we just left her. But he's like, I really like this woman, and don't worry, she's not going to figure it out. I told her we're from the Yukon. Da, da, da. And we essentially see that whenever Ariel gets really depressed and sad, she like starts to destabilize and needs to like turn back into a bubble, which she can do by filling a sink with water and like just going in there and hanging out for a bit. So cut back to the meeting of these two young ladies. And like dinner it has as many hijinks as you expect, but nothing too crazy, except that, like they're essentially told that their parents are engaged, which destabilizes Ariel. She has to run to the bathroom because she's like, this can't be happening. She's losing her shit. And we assume that when she goes in there, she turns herself into a bubble. When when Meg is sent to check on her, she sees her like soaking wet, and she's like, what happened to you? She's like, and Ariel's like, oh, I fell in the sink. And Meg is like, that's super, super weird. But so they don't get off to a great start. And now Ariel and Cosmo are moving in. So Ariel will be going to school with Meg. On the first day of this, like, she comes out and she's wearing like a bunch of clothes that look odd to Meg, and she doesn't know how to ride a bike. And just like Meg is like, this girl is so, so, so weird. But they get to school and everyone actually thinks that Ariel is like super deep and interesting and like gorgeous and so like fashion ahead of her time. And everybody just essentially fawns all over her, just like falls for her. And like, it's not very ideal in any way, shape, or form. And we see so Meg hates that, but from Ariel's perspective, she's like, she doesn't understand why these humans, she thinks that they're like kind of vapid. She doesn't understand like why these humans think she's so cool, and like why they just don't understand the basics of what she does, basic alien stuff. And her mom, so Meg's mom is like, listen, you guys have to get along because I love this man. So she forces them to go windsurfing. And when they go windsurfing, Cutter, the love of Meg's life, comes up to Ariel on the beach because Ariel refuses to get in the water. She fears the wind. Why would you ask children who fear the wind to go windsurfing? Don't make no sense. But so Meg is like, that's the last straw. And now they officially hate each other, can't stand each other. And they essentially admit that to each other, that they think that they're each awful, and hatch a plan to split their parents up by pretending to be best friends, and therefore, like, then essentially suggesting that each parent has insulted the other. Meg tries to tell her mother that Cosmo thinks she's an airhead, and Ariel tries to tell her father, Cosmo, that Meg's mom doesn't think that doesn't think that he's manly enough. So it seems like that could work, but then Trevor essentially catches on to what they're doing, and he likes Cosmo, and he likes seeing his mother happy, and his sister is rude to him, so he just foils their plan. And now they're in a lot of trouble, but they decide, okay, we have one more last Hail Mary. Let's try to get other people, like get them to fall in love with other people by saying we're sorry and we're going to throw them a party and just invite other people that we think would be perfect for them. So they do that, and they invite Serena Sue, that psychic, and, Meg's dad, who's a workaholic and, the ex-husband of her mother. That plan also backfires because Serena Sue and Meg's dad fall madly in love with each other instantaneously. And Ariel is just so upset by all of this that she, decides to send a message to Fanul, consequences be damned. So all these plans don't work. It's now the day of the wedding. And lo and behold, Fanul shows up. And at first, Ariel is excited. Then she sees that he has brought his father, the Emperor. And she's like, Fanul, how could you betray me? And Fanul was like, in his robotic, drone stormtrooper voice, like, I have seen the light. My father changes bad. We must destroy you and your father. So he like guards her while the Emperor goes out on a hunt for Cosmo. He eventually finds Cosmo, and Cosmo had been with Trevor at the time, and he like sends Trevor away. And the Emperor is essentially about to turn Cosmo into, that frozen bubble situation. While this has been happening, Meg was sent to go find Ariel. She goes and she finds Ariel like locked up with Fanul, and he tries to keep her captive. Cutter also ends up showing up. They are all, in theory, trapped in this room by this bubble boy, but they essentially convince him through like the idea of freedom on Earth, and that there are many flavors of potato chips, that his father was wrong, so he agrees to help them. They go out and they like catch it just in time, like to stop him from like, or I mean, he does manage to freeze Cosmo, but like they catch him in time, and they try to use hair dryers to like blow him up. Doesn't work at first. Then Trevor shows up with a leaf blower, blows him up. It's quite effective. He goes pop. Like Fanul has changed his ways. He unfreezes Cosmo. Cosmo and Meg's mom get married. There's a party, and the two stepsisters have learned to like see beyond just their initial hatred of each other, see that there's value in the weird ways of each other. They switch men. Ariel now seems to be with Cutter. Fanul seems to have a thing for Meg. And then they dance badly in the backyard of their home at the reception of the wedding, and all is well.
Yeah, and I think with that, we will be right back with the review.
So, Chelsea, how do you feel about Stepsister from Planet Weird?
As a grown adult.
As a grown adult with perspective and life experience. And who has also seen many films now. Like, a lot more art.
It's actually not like bad. Like, I wouldn't say that. It's not a bad movie. It's just like it doesn't have the same I wasn't as captivated by it as I was when I was a child, which I could not tell you why I was when I was a child. So yeah, it's one of those where I would definitely be like, do you really need to rewatch it? No, but it's also not one that I would say don't rewatch, if that makes sense. Like it's like if you feel like it, sure, but you don't have to. It's there. It's fine. Like it's literally fine. How do you feel?
I mean, I think that this is definitely considered a classic of the DCOM situation. Like I feel like it's one that is very memorable. If for no other reason, like just for the title and the basic premise of it. And I think that like I said, I also definitely loved it as a kid. And I think that the reason that it works really well for kids is because it is very low stakes, like sci-fi stuff.
Yeah.
Which is cool. Like aliens are cool to kids. But it's like these aliens, they're bubbles. They can be destroyed with a hairdryer. It's very, and like the ones that show up, like they like root beer. It's like, it's very low stakes. It's very well packaged for like a child's mind to be able to fundamentally process what's going on. Like, okay, like oppression light, they escape, they find love, right? And then like these two kids, like, the same thing with, growing up for me, it was cousins. And it's like, you have cousins that are weird, or you have family friends that are weird, or, sometimes blended families were like a big thing, 1980 to 2000, or like the amalgamation of children into one home. See the Brady Bunch and all other iterations of the Brady Bunch. So like it's that thing of like, oh, there's going to be conflict because you're like kind of different. But then you learn that at the end of the day, you're all kids. And so like a lot of things are actually the same. And you can just like learn to, be kind to each other. It's all very, very, very kid friendly, but still a kind of cool subject. So yeah, I think I understand like why it existed in our minds the way it did when we were younger. But, upon being older, I do have some qualms. I do have some qualms. The main one, I don't know, should I start with the main one or should we ease into it?
No, you could start with the main one.
Okay, my main one is this whole situation of like this teenage girl hating her body, and it makes. Here's the thing. It kind of does like it tracks the idea of like, oh, she's an alien and she's used to being like gassy and just like not solid. So being in a different state, being very solid, like is gross to her, which is fair to a certain extent. But like everything that she does, says, how she dresses, the way that she behaves, like falls into a very specific condition that was a problem. I mean, it's always going to be a problem. It's still a problem. But like, I know that like at that age, the ages of like, let's say like 12 to 16 or 12 to 17 is when like it's sort of understood that girls or just teenagers in general tend to be the most sort of vulnerable to developing eating disorders. And it's like homegirl has classic symptoms of anorexia. like right on the money. And my issue is that this is a situation where you see her constantly being sort of like not rewarded, but not having any consequences for any of it. Like everyone at school thinks that she's like really fashionable and they think that she's really cute and she's like gorgeous and like all of her depressive, like clearly arguably clinically depressed statements are seen as like really deep and poetic and all of this stuff. And it's like, I just don't like seeing that reinforced on screen, whether or not that was the intention.
Yeah, and then all of it really being framed or excused because it's like, well, she's an alien, so like, of course she can't eat earthly food, and of course she can't, do things that we can do, or she looks otherworldly, and yeah, so it definitely is something that you kind of notice once you first recognize it, then you notice the pattern throughout the rest of the movie and how often it really comes up, because I remember right when she first refused the food when they go to dinner for the first time with the Larsons, that's when you kind of picked up on it and were like, are they basically saying that this girl has an eating disorder of some sort? And yeah, it is a very it's definitely one of those things where I'm like, I don't think they did that on purpose, of course, because like obviously that's very anti what they do, but it is something that you pick up, and especially for the time period in 2000, like that was a really, really big there's a really big PR campaign against that for young women, because coming out of the 90s, like where thin was in, they had a huge problem with girls from all races, all ethnicities, like becoming anorexic because they wanted to be very small. So it does seem very odd, like now looking back, and I definitely think that if somebody were to make a version of this today, it would not include something like this, because why? Like it also was like you could have just picked different things that would be very different between Earth and another world. So it is a little weird. But yeah, no, I agree. I agree that was something that definitely comes up quite a lot. And then I know something else that we had kind of discussed was also the idea of like these just actively evil middle schooler that exists throughout this entire film. Everybody, like all of them, from Megan Larson, who Ariel repeatedly calls evil Megan Larson,
so funny,
to Ariel herself, to the popular girls at their school. Like it's just like everybody is actively horrible, which I do expect from 12 and 13-year-olds. Like, don't get me wrong.
It will always be the case. They will always be kind of terrible.
Sort of self-awareness, but they still have the youth to where they just say anything they think. 11 to like 13 is very dodgy.
Yeah, no, there's no, like, I respect middle school teachers so much. So much. It's like y'all go to war every day.
Because those kids don't care. They have no respect. They are literally just like, if they think you're ugly or they think whatever you're wearing is hideous, they will tell you, because they don't see why they shouldn't. Like, the filter hasn't come in yet. Um, so
And they
yes,
kind of, and sometimes they do like to revel in your pain.
oh
Like
yes,
they
that
kind of
too.
they want to watch you squirt.
That too. They
So
have no
it's quite dark.
boundaries. There's no
Yeah.
boundaries in middle school. It's such a dark age for all. But you definitely see it in this one because, like, when she calls evil Megan Larson, like, you're like, yeah, Megan has earned this name. Like, she is truly insane. Like,
And just the whole situation of like, all right, like, I mean, I do kind of agree with you that I think that both of your parents are being a little rash here,
very
which was
rash.
another issue that I had, and we can talk about it a bit more later if you want, or we don't have to. But like, it's this whole like breakdown of a woman's ability to like a woman's ability, period, without a man. You know what I mean? Like suddenly her mother can't cook, and it's like, but you've been feeding them for 14 years, right? So like what? Like I'm confused. Like did you just always order takeout? And if that's true, like I know you're getting child support money, so why can't you still do that? Like it just doesn't make any sense.
I feel like they were trying to get across that maybe she was like depressed after her divorce or after their separation,
That's what
but
I
it
think is
wasn't
the
coming
idea.
across as well as it could have.
Yeah, and it's like, and even if that's the case, like the idea that I have an issue with the idea that the immediate thing that has to be done is you have to go and find another partner. Like if anything,
Yeah.
we all know now that those types of situations and getting into relationships when you're in that place only like tends to only lead to like more heartache because you're not actually in a place to be in a relationship yet. You're just a little lonely and sad, and that will pass, and you should use that time to like work on yourself and figure out what you actually want from your next coupling if you choose that you want to couple again, but et cetera, et cetera. But she's going through that, and meanwhile, Cosmo, in theory, right, days ago, had to leave his wife that he was very much still with, and in theory still loved, as a prisoner of war, as a political prisoner on this planet.
Circle
But
on.
Zircalon. But he is immediately just smitten and like totally cool with like getting with this woman. So all right, fair enough. Like, yes, maybe both of these people should not be looking to get in any sort of relationship right now, right? But that being said, these two girls still actively see their parents kind of happy for a change. And because they are inconvenienced, mind you, nobody's done that to them, but because they are inconvenienced and just don't like the concept of this coupling, they have actively decided to cause harm to hurt their parents' feelings, to just actively like break up this couple. And it's like it does put the whole it's just messed up, man. It's just not cool. It's not cool.
No, I agree. They are, I mean, I remember when we were talking about it afterward, I said that they're basically the early versions of the woman from I Care a Lot. That Netflix movie with Rosamund Pike. Because it's
Where it's
just like
impossible to like anybody.
literally everybody is
Like, I
this
don't
is
want you to
truly an
win.
anti-hero movie because it was just like what I don't know what I'm supposed to be going for here. Like because y'all are actively evil and even Ariel is just like she basically just wants to get back with her man on Zircalon. Like that's the only reason she wants to go home. She kind of doesn't even really care about her mother. Like it's like everybody in this is so selfish. But again, I'm also acknowledging that at the age they are, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I mean, but it's kind of how I felt about Gone Girl too. Like, just
Right.
the place where it's like
Gone
all
Girl
of
and I
this is
Care a
toe
Lot,
up.
completely different situation. These with this specific movie, they're between the ages of 12 and 14, so God help them. They really think everything has to do with them. Because even at the end when Ariel and Megan meet up with Fanul, who is, Ariel's ex-boyfriend, who's also the supreme leader of Zircalon's son. Like Megan is like, "Did you do all of this just to get at me?" And Ariel is like, "No, girl, what?" Like it was like so self-involved that Megan would literally think this girl ran away from political repression with her father and came to down to earth solely so they could mess with Megan's life. Like, it's like, girl, no, none of this had anything to do with you. You just got caught in the crosshairs.
It's so
But
wild.
again,
It's so wild.
self-involvement. They're about 13 or 14. Makes perfect sense. But yes, everybody in this all the young children are very self-involved. And I think
except for Trevor. Trevor's actually but he's 7. He hasn't gotten there
he hasn't
yet.
gotten there yet. He's all
he
cares
will.
about are his toys, cars, and God knows what else. Just that everything is decent at home. He's like, am I being fed
stop?
3 times a day?
And just like, can you stop trying to make mommy sad?
Literally.
she's happy for once. Can you just let that be the case, please? That would be nice. Also, Cosmo was a great playmate. Stop trying to ruin.
He really was. He really was. He was very childlike. And I think one other thing we actually noted is this is the same little brother from My Mom's Got a Date with the Vampire.
Yeah.
And he is just as on the money on this one as he was on that one with everything. Like, he immediately says that Cosmo is an alien and so is Ariel. So he is the only person who is not shocked when they start turning into the bubbles whenever they get wet. Like, he's just like, okay.
Yeah.
Like, I told you they were aliens. Nobody listens to me.
Yeah.
But they also had some really good pop cultural references in this one. And this seems like 2001 kind of seems like when Disney basically ended doing those. And I think it was a purposeful decision because you don't want to date movies.
Yeah.
Especially movies like this where it's going to live on TV and stuff. So it's like, I understand, but it is still kind of nice to get the occasional, like, oh yeah, that was going on in 2000, and like, because he mentions that he wants to be a Men in Black.
She's like, you can't do that
because you were a
He's
single
like,
man.
but I want to be a Men in Black. Which is actually, that was I appreciated that little exchange because I was like, that is something like a 7-year-old would say.
In 2000, yeah, no, it makes perfect sense because Men in Black was the movie. Like, he's like, this is cool for the 7-year-old.
But it's also like they reference like Goodwill Hunting because Ariel like is intelligent and can calculate or actually, let's not even say she's intelligent. She was once gas and can therefore calculate volume quite easily. And to which like one of the girls in class is like, "Oh, check out Goodwill Hunting over there." It's like, okay, Disney, I see you, because that is not a movie for Disney to reference as far as I'm concerned. But that, that's like that movie gets deals with some things.
But I guess it does make sense that, kids in that year group would have seen it. Or would at least
just
have
became
heard
one of those
about
things.
It existed as much in culture. Because they even reference, we were talking about this because it was so funny. They referenced Prince William and they said, oh, I heard that Ariel was dating Prince William before she came here. And this was also funny because I was like, Prince William was definitely not the same age. Like, it would have been one thing had they done this in like the 90s when he was 14 or 15, but he was definitely about to go to college in 2000 if I'm not mistaken. Like, I want to say that boy was 17 or 18.
Yeah, but it was a running thing because you remember in Princess Diaries, I don't know if you do remember in Princess Diaries 2, but in Princess Diaries 2 there's that part where they're like doing a slideshow of all the available
princes,
all the available not princes, because she can't marry a prince. Or, like, it's a thing of, like, she can't marry someone who has their own country or whatever. Or in line for their own throne. But they're showing, like, all the eligible nobles. And Prince William's photo comes up. And they're like, oh, like, they're, like, so happy about it. As a concept.
Right.
They're just like, oh, I just like to look at him. So I guess, like, we missed the boat on that. But I think for this era, he was, like, he was like a Jonathan Taylor Thomas, like teen heartthrob situation.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, we've all seen, or I don't know if everybody has, but if you have not, look up photos of Prince William before 2002 or 3, before he got out of college, because
just before.
I also didn't understand it because I didn't really like tap into the whole royal thing until 2011 when Kate and William got married. I truly didn't care before then.
But nah, he was
actually very attractive in his younger years, so I 100% understand it. But yeah, so it's funny because they bring him up. They also make a Sanford and Son reference, which was very specific because I was just like, why does a 7-year-old know about Sanford and Son? But I was like, they did have TV Land at that point, so I guess
exactly. Or like Nick at Night, if not TV Land yet. They definitely had Nick at Night.
Yeah, a 7-year-old, I guess, in 2000 would know
Yeah, that's when I started watching Gilligan's Island.
Yeah, no, and I think I was into Good Times, or that might have come like a year or two later. But yeah, like you start finding those older shows. So yeah, it was funny. It was very. They had some very funny references in this one. I do kind of miss them doing them. I think it's kind of nice, honestly. Like it just gives you an idea of like what was popular with that cohort at that time.
Yeah, but at the same time, I do hear your point. Like a kid, like if I put my, like little cousins in front of that right now, they would have no concept of what.
Right. Any of that.
I mean, actually, no. They know Men in Black. They wouldn't really understand the Prince William thing. They'd be probably a little confused by that. But yeah.
Yeah, it's I see why they've kind of phased it out as a thing, other than like on certain, like sometimes they'll do it on the shows. Like we talked previously about Proud Family, how like that was the whole thing in the Proud Families. It was just a running series of pop culture references.
Yeah,
But
but that
that
was
was
a
also a
little
very
different
specific
though.
thing. Right. It was a specific
Yeah, because
thing.
it was a cultural lexicon that they were
Right. It made sense.
referencing.
It made sense for the time. Because I
Yeah.
want to say the only movie before this.
Or a subcultural lexicon.
Yeah, I want to say one of the only movies before this that we like specifically noted the pop culture references was Under Wraps, because they mentioned like Dennis Rodman. And it was just so funny. But that was also the first one they ever did, so like it was a different situation. But yeah, it's just interesting, I think, when they do put in things, because sometimes most of their movies very much exist in a Disney vacuum where nothing else is going on except Disney. So it's always interesting when they kind of break out of that and they're like, oh no, like let's talk about Goodwill Hunting or Men in Black or whatever. Would also be interested. I actually didn't look this up, but I wonder if Disney did those movies. Like not Disney proper, but you know how they own so many
Yeah,
studios.
I'm trying to think.
Yeah, I'll have to.
I mean, it would make sense if they only reference things that they have sort of direct licensing to.
Right.
But I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I'm not either. I actually don't think they did. Huh. I looked up Goodwill Hunting. They were Miramax. So yeah, I don't think they did. Interesting. But anyways, that was just one of those things that we did actually enjoy in this one. And I think something else that you kind of hinted to earlier was also the fact that, once we got to a certain point in this movie, everybody just stopped talking about Ariel's mom, who was very much like was frozen but still alive. So
Yeah.
as soon as they figured out how to unfreeze people, like, and they got the supreme leader overlord guy, Svad, under control, like it's like, so you guys could just go back to Zirkalon and unfreeze your mom and like things would be fine. But instead that doesn't happen and they get married at the end. Like
and it's like this thing of like, okay, so there was political like turmoil
right
on this planet, and Fanul doesn't seem like he's going back home either. So nobody's gonna know what happened to the Emperor. No, like things could go back and things could be like really solved on this planet, but it really seems like y'all are like, we like it here, I think. We're just gonna stay here and leave all of the other bubbles to suffer. It just seems a little. Again, it just comes back to that like deep selfishness that permeates and maybe arguably permeated the early aughts. Like maybe this is just a product of the time.
Especially 2000. I mean, I think if you think of the decades, it makes sense, because 2000, we were at a point where we were coming off the heady 80s. And then you had the 90s, which were pretty good. We weren't in a recession or anything. And we were pretty much on the up and up. Like as the US as a country, of course. I'm not talking about the whole earth. I mean, other than like Desert Storm, which went into the early 90s, like we didn't even really have like a war or anything going. Like it was a very dare I say delightful. Delightful, or like it's a period that now looking back, I'm like, there was not really that much going on in the lead up to 2000 until 2001. And then, of course, everything changes. But
yeah,
it was a very like lighter time, I would say. Obviously, I'm not saying nothing was going on for anybody. There were. But like as a whole in the US, looking back now, it was a much lighter time. So
Yeah,
yeah, I feel like
we were
everybody
kind of
could
chilling.
you could be self-involved. Like I feel like the same thing if you were to make this movie now, I don't know if that would be you could I don't think you could do the same things because the generation now, Gen Z, is like not that self-involved because they can't afford to be. Like it's just a different, it's a different generation, different
Yeah.
times. So yeah, it's just funny, just an interesting thing to think about. But it would make sense for like 2000, where everybody is literally just like vapid and vacuous, as she calls the popular girls. Because it was like, well, we don't care about
and
anything
they
else.
revel in it.
Yeah, literally.
They're like, "Oh, horrible, monstrous." And you're like, this is toxic. This is a deeply toxic way of existing.
Truly, truly. And I think another fun thing that we found is that the guy that wrote this, Chris Matheson, is like the co-writer of the Bill and Ted franchise. Which, if you guys haven't seen it, it's Keanu Reeves. His like first big film role, I think. Basically playing like it's like a stoner comedy. Or three now. The third one just came out last year. And yeah, so I was like, oh, this makes sense.
It all tracks now. I see how
It all
we got
makes
here.
so much sense. So Nina, do you think you would show this to the kids?
I'm not watching it with nobody. If they turn it on and they feel like watching it, fine. But we will also have a I mean, I'm not gonna poke bears unnecessarily, but like I do have strong feelings about, any of my children potentially, like if my kids, like if I hear them repeat, "Oh, food is messy," like we're gonna have a problem. So I don't know. I guess it depends on the age they are when they decide to do it for the first time. I don't really know. It's not something that I feel. If it went back in the Disney vault, I wouldn't be mad at it. But I also understand that some people think it's a classic. Like I really don't know. I don't know what would happen if my kids decided to turn it on. I don't know whether or not I would point out to them that this child has maybe that's what it is. I'd let them watch it and I would just say, I need you to understand this child has an unhealthy relationship with food.
Yeah, you could.
Don't follow anything that you see on this program. That is the only way that I will allow it to keep playing. And then we can move on.
Yeah,
so
I feel like I would also do
that,
like that thing before, just a little bit, just being like, please don't copy her in terms of not eating. Like you need to eat.
And don't hatch plans to ruin my happiness. If I choose to marry somebody, barring that person having done something to you, that is not your decision to make, okay? Because kids were like, I'm realizing that like there was a whole period of time where we would get a lot of these films that were really trying to tell us all of the different ways in which like, children seem to have like the ability to like, really like mess up like parents' marriages and things like that. And like we like accept it and we were like, oh, like that's cool.
Right.
But the truth of it is that like children do also need to understand that like those are not their decisions to make. And again, barring like actual harm coming to you, you know what I mean? Like unless that person does something to you, you don't get to decide my happiness. Small thing that will leave me the first moment that you can. So
yeah.
There's also that.
No,
there's also that.
I feel you on that. Yeah, I think this is one where it's just like, I would talk with them beforehand, but they could watch it, it'd be fine. I don't necessarily need to watch it with them. But I agree though that there definitely was that lasted for a long time because that was a whole genre in kids TV is just like kids breaking up their parents' marriages. I feel like that was a lot of Mary-Kate and Ashley movies.
Do you remember
Lindsay Lohan in The Parent Trap? Like,
Are We There Yet was one of my favorite iterations of that.
Like that was a very big genre.
Like, we are gonna make this man's life a living hell.
Literally.
It's like it's just uncalled for. And like, I mean, I have no intention of, spanking my children, but like those are the types of things that live in the world of maybe a beating is deserved. That's all I'll say about that.
Well,
if I have somebody come to the house and you pour things on that person, like, yeah, you probably deserve an ass whooping. Like, that's not okay.
No, I don't. Yeah, this is definitely where that I'm like this. It definitely needs to be shown that you should not do that because there are legitimate consequences, even though there aren't for the people that are in those movies.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the thing is there's generally almost no consequences for the kids in the movies. Like it's literally just like either the people end up getting together and like the kids end up liking the step parent, or it's a situation where they're just like the step parent was evil, so they needed to leave. Like that's what happens with Parent Trap, and then the father sees how evil Meredith is, and like it, then she's gone, and they get remarried to their mom. But like it, like it's like that's not
Yeah, and the way we
that's
got,
not
can
the
you
answer.
imagine?
That's not what would
Can
happen in
you
real life.
imagine being in the woods and twins are like actively trying to make the woods worse?
Right.
Can you imagine that? 12-year-old twins are trying to make your experience in the woods as horrible as it can be. Like that's an actual horror film. You know what I mean? Like that's not like we should not encourage children to think that's an acceptable way to behave because it's just not under any circumstance or under very few circumstances is it an acceptable way to behave.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So yeah, I think with that, guys, I mean, as I said earlier, I would say pass overall unless you have really like strong feelings about this one. But I don't really think you need to rewatch.
Yeah.
But with that, guys, we will talk to you next week.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of The Critics Kingdom. Don't forget to follow us on Spotify and SoundCloud so you can stay up to date, as well as interacting and letting us know what you guys think on social media. You can find us on Twitter at Critics Kingdom and on Instagram at The Critics Kingdom. We're excited to talk to you again next week.